it's Pastor Alicia. I just wanted to take a few moments with you all to share a short devotional. Given that we are still in the season of Easter, I want to talk today about resurrection. I was reminded this past week by Reverend Nadia Boltz-Weber that resurrection is not something that happens in our Easter Sunday best, but rather something that happens while the dirt from the grave is still under our fingernails. In the resurrection story, Mary likely thought Jesus was the gardener because he still had dirt under his nails from being in the grave. Thinking about this process of resurrection reminded me of Paul's story in Acts. In Acts chapter 26, Paul is recounting to King Agrippa the story of his life. He talks about growing up as a young Jewish boy, becoming a Pharisee, and then eventually he moves on to talking about his persecution of Christians and his conversion. And I want to read a little bit of that for you. I'm going to be reading out of the Message translation, beginning in chapter 26, verse 9. Paul says, "I admit that I didn't always hold to this position. For a time, I thought it was my duty to oppose this Jesus of Nazareth with all my might. Backed with the full authority of the high priests, I threw these believers, I had no idea they were God's people, into the Jerusalem jail right and left, and whenever it came to a vote, I voted for their execution. I stormed through their meeting places, bullying them into cursing Jesus, a one-man terror obsessed with obliterating these people. And then I started on the towns outside of Jerusalem. One day on my way to Damascus, armed as always with papers from the high priests authorizing my action, right in the middle of the day, a blaze of light outshining the sun, poured out of the sky on me and my companions. Oh, King, it was so bright. We fell flat on our faces. Then I heard a voice in Hebrew. Saul, Saul, why are you out to get me? Why do you insist on going against the grain? I said, Who are you, Master? The voice answered, I am Jesus, the one you're hunting down like an animal. But now, up on your feet. I have a job for you. I've handpicked you to be a servant and a witness to what's happened today and to what I'm going to show you. Paul's conversion story reminded me of something I read in a devotional this past weekend by Donna Barber. In it, she talks about conversion and resurrection. And she says this, though conversion may be pinpointed to a moment, salvation is a process that continues over a lifetime. I'm still being saved from old ways of thinking and behaving, and am coming to new understandings, to new life. Even the transition from death to life is sometimes progressive. Saul, though converted in a flash of light on the Damascus road, still had to travel from spiritual and physical blindness to sight. And Paul continued to grow and receive revelation through his life. This made me think about the ways that we are continuing to experience resurrection in our life. Resurrection isn't something that stops with our conversion, and we know that our resurrection hasn't even been completed yet. And so I wonder how we can begin to notice these many resurrections in our life, and if noticing them can also help us be patient with our own transformation and with the transformation of others. I was reminded too how God is often forming us through the trials that we experience. Sometimes we're so quick to get to the end of them that we forget about what's happening in the process. Now, this doesn't negate their pain or their difficulty at all, but I think often the process forms us more than wherever it ends up getting us. Later in this same devotion by Donna Barber, she ends it by saying, we forget that time passed between the cross and the empty grave, between it is finished and all power is given to me. We forget that we are working out this salvation with fear and trembling on a road that, while long and sometimes bumpy, nevertheless leads to wholeness and new life. So if it feels like it's too late, or nothing is happening, or you're still stumbling around in the darkness, don't give up. Choose to trust and wait a while longer. It could be your answer is already in the process, or perhaps God is just making clay. Friends, I encourage us today and this week to examine how God is continually forming us, how we're continuing to work out our salvation with fear and trembling, in the ways that God is performing many resurrections in our life all the time. That's all for today, but I hope that you are all well and know that you are loved by us and by God.